Okay, so my name is Colleen Klimczak. I am a certified professional organizer. In a normal week, I would go to people's homes and businesses and help them get organized. Obviously, nothing about our weeks right now are normal, but I'm very glad to have the opportunity to present to all of you exactly when we were scheduled to do so way back when. I think I presented back in January and Stephanie invited me back then to do this presentation. So again, I'm very pleased that we're able to do it in a different format, but just as scheduled. So that's pretty cool. So thanks for spending the next hour or so with me. If you want to ask a question, you have the option in the chat. And again, Stephanie will be checking on that. If you want to ask the group, there's an option for that. And if you want to just ask me, there's an option for that. So if you want it to just be a question that I'll answer at the end, then pop that into the chat. I also want to draw your attention to the handout that's in front of you, which would be one that you would get if we were doing this in person. What I would like you to do right now, if you want, is if you want to drop me an email to the address listed here, Colleen@peaceofmindpo.com. You want to drop me an email and just put handout in the subject line, then I will be happy to send you this handout as an attachment, PDF form, immediately upon completion of this class. So I will give you the information without giving you paper, since we are talking about managing paper tonight. None of it will be actual paper, so there you go. Okay, to get started, paper management and getting a grip on your paper is one of my most popular classes because, let's face it, we all have paper and we all have challenges with our paper. So I'm going to talk about 3 different kinds of paper tonight. There's probably more, but I'm going to talk about 3 kinds. We're going to talk about why each of them is important and what is most important to remember about them, and then what we need to do to take care of them. Okay, so those are the 3 things that we're going to talk about. I'm going to try and stick to right around an hour. A friend and confidant yesterday was saying that anything over an hour via Zoom seems really long and tedious. So I don't want to be long and tedious. And so if I don't get to the documents and how long to keep them, which is the second half of this page, that's why I would love for you guys to have the handout. So some of that is just something that you can go through on your own and refer back to if you have the handout. So again, I'll try to keep us concise. So, and again, thanks for being here tonight. So I mentioned there are 3 types of paper in most of our homes. There's probably more, but for our purposes tonight, what I want to talk about are active, passive papers, and archival papers, okay? So active papers are the papers that are on your desk or in your mailbox or on the dining room table, kitchen counter. How am I doing? Does that sound about right? All those different places that those piles might pile up. So the active papers are things that require an action from us, okay? So either an action right now or maybe sometime soon in the future, right? So an example of those would be bills to pay. They might be forms to complete and send back to your child's school, or things to take to the doctor's office with you. It might be a birthday card that you need to send out that you bought this week, but it's not, off until next week. Active papers are those things that require a next action from us, okay? There might also be, errands to run, coupons, things to purchase, things to return, that kind of stuff. Those might all end up in active papers, okay? The other end of the spectrum from our active papers are our archival papers. And an archival paper would be anything that we might need today or not, or in 20 years, okay? So I just want you to know I'm coming to all of you from my bedroom. So here we are. And I'm not shy in telling you that there is a safe, a portable fireproof safe under my bed. Now, I'm not shy in telling you that because it has nothing that's important to anybody but us. It's not like I have gold bullion in a safe under my bed. That would be awesome, but it's not very likely, okay? But what is in there are our archival papers. So it has my husband and I's wills and power of attorneys for healthcare and finance. It has, it might have our passports. It could have our birth certificates, marriage certificates, social security cards, all that kind of information. So it has those documents. It could have the titles to our cars. It could have the mortgage papers for our homes. So those are the things that we need to keep. It's not actually a very big pile. That kind of pile, it would be very important that we protect it, but it's not terribly important. We shouldn't be finding that stuff actively around our homes. And it also shouldn't really take up a lot of space, okay? So we have our active papers. And what we need to do on those, remember, is act on them, okay? We have our archival papers, and the most important thing to remember about our archival papers is to protect them, okay? Hence the fireproof safe under my bed. And then the middle paper, that's what bogs most people down, okay? So the middle type, the second, but the mess in the middle is what I call it. Those are our passive papers. And our passive papers are bills that have been paid, or projects that are complete, or you know, things that we want to keep for a while, and then we only need to keep them for a certain amount of time, and then we can let them go, okay? So our passive papers, they are passive because all they do is sit around our house or in a file, and then at certain times, when it comes time for maintenance, it's time for us to send them on their way. Okay, so the most important things to remember about our passive papers is to maintain, but also then to purge them when it comes time to do so, okay? So those are the three kinds of paper that we're gonna talk about tonight. Now, other kinds of paper that there might be could be photos or memorabilia. They could be keepsakes like children's papers from school. And I don't mean the ones that need to, again, be like signed off and sent back to school, because that would be an active paper. But, you know, for my 15-year-old, if I have a book report from 3rd grade that we all really loved, like, should I find that now? No, I certainly should not. That would be an item that would be maybe a keepsake paper, okay? So those are other types of papers that you might run across, but that's not really what we're gonna talk about in the next 50 minutes or so, okay? So active, passive, and archival. Those are the real questions. Those are the things that we're going to talk about tonight, okay? So most of my classes boil down to clearing clutter, okay? And clutter is anything that we don't need, use, or love. So if we don't need a paper and we haven't used it, or we no longer need to use it, and we certainly don't love it, meaning one of those keepsake items or things like that. So if we don't need it, we don't need to, we don't use it, and we're not particularly attached to it, then that's clutter, and it can probably go away, okay? So the real question for everything, especially our papers, is can we find what we need when we need it, right? And so that is a really important thing to think about with your papers. We always want to be able to put our hands on, you know, something that came in that we need to do something with, right? That is really important. We want to act on the active papers. We want to protect the archival papers. But when we do need them, it's, you know, we want to be able to put our hands on them easily. And then the passive papers, we don't want them to pile up so much for many, many years, because then we can't find anything because there's just too much, okay? So again, the real question comes back to, can you find what you need when you need it, all right? So I usually talk about a process from a woman named Julie Morgenstern. If we were at the public library today, I would put in a plug for books from Julie Morgenstern, because I'm sure she is on the shelves at the Blue Island Public Library. And she's on the shelves in lots of places because she's really cool. So if you get a chance, please don't purchase the book. You can borrow the book, right? Don't purchase the book. If We weren't all self-isolated. You could borrow it from me if you'd like, but or the library. But she would talk about a 5-step process for any of our organizing projects. And so Julie Morgan Stern would call it, she's got a 5-step process. That's an acronym, which is kind of nice. So SPACE. We sort what we have, we purge what can go, we assign a home to what's left, we containerize what's left, and then we equalize what's left, which is a fancy word for maintenance, okay? So we will walk through that process, and we'll also apply it again to our papers, okay? So as we're going through our papers, the first thing that we want to do is we want to sort it. Now you can sort it into those very broad categories first if you'd like, okay? So those would be the active or passive or archival, okay? Very often we have, subcategories within those, obviously. Depending on what we need to use our papers for will dictate why we need to, how we need to sort them, okay? So I just like those broad categories of active, passive, and archival. Excuse me. Okay, so once we have sorted what we have, we then purge what can go. So once we sort what we have, we realize that we have Real Simple magazines from 7 years. And then we wonder why we don't have any room on our bookshelves for books. Okay, so once we sort, then we can start to look at things and go, how can we purge? What do we need to let go of to make room for things that are important, that we do need and we do use and we do love? Okay, so decision making is actually the biggest time waster for organizing. Very often I am the physical hands to help people organize, but in this time of COVID, I'm also still the decision maker or the decision making guide, because obviously my clients make decisions for themselves.
What are you talking
We want to make decisions easy, and so we're going to talk about something called document retention policies when it comes to passive papers in just a bit. But that's really important. What we need to do is make decision making easier. We need to have boundaries and expiration dates on our papers. We also need to recognize something that's called the Pareto principle, which is called the 80-20 rule. And the 80-20 rule tells us that 80% of what we need is in 20% of our stuff. I'm going to say that like 3 more times. 80% of what we need is in 20% of our stuff. What I mean by that is if you have 10 things that came in the mailbox today, maybe you need to do something with 2 or 3 of them. Maybe. If you have, you're in my bedroom, okay? So if I open my closet, if I have 10 pairs of pants, I probably wear the same 2 or 3 all the time. If I have 10 appliances in my kitchen, I probably use the same 2 or 3 all the time, okay? And so what that means is what we really need to do is focus on that 20% that we always use and maybe let some of that 80% that we don't use as often, that's probably where it can go, okay? So we also need to have regular purging habits. So that would be, every year after tax time, you shred the documents from, taxes 4 years ago and, anything you don't need from 2 years before or something like that. We'll talk about all that in a little bit. But we need to make that a habit, okay? So I had to laugh. Usually I like to bring today's mail to my presentations when I'm going. This is it. That's all I had. And I took it out of the recycling bin to bring it in here to class because this is all I had. That's it. So regular purging starts with our day-to-day mail. And, making sure that the stuff that comes every day, we're also going to talk a little bit about how to make that less. So maybe you also will only get little teeny piles like that. But having that be a regular habit really helps us to stay on track, okay? And purging before the paper arrives, which is item number 5 under purge on the handout in front of you, is to purge before it arrives. And so, like I said, I'm going to share that on the handout, and then there's a couple different websites that you can go to and things like that, okay? After we've sorted and purged, we need to assign a home for things. We need to make sure that that is a place that makes sense. And we will talk about that under each of the different types of paper, okay? The quote that I want to show you under there is that filing is for retrieval, not for storage. I'll say that like 3 more times too. So filing is for retrieval, not for storage, tells us that when we put papers away, we should be putting them away so that we can find them again, okay? So that tells us, A, we shouldn't be keeping anything that we don't need or that we won't have to retrieve again. And also we should be storing things together that might come out together. So you might have a folder that is called car or automotive, and in there could be your insurance policy, maybe the title to your car if you want to do it that way. I don't, maybe the, monthly payment, not receipts, but the bill stubs and things like that. So anything having to do with the car would come out together, because if you were in an accident or you wanted to sell the car, needed maintenance records, then all of it would be together. So that's just, like I said, filing is for retrieval, not for storage. Tells us that we want to be able to put things together so we can take them out together, okay? The 4th step after we have sorted and purged and assigned a home is to containerize. Do not buy new stuff just yet. I know it's tempting, but don't. But when we're containerizing, we need to think about what kind of paper we're storing, where we're storing it. Do we want it to be in a decorative container? Does it just need to be functional? And again, we'll talk about that under each of the different types of paper. And then finally, the 5th step is to maintain the system. And that is that regular purging or regular attention to things, getting rid of what you can get rid of before it even arrives, and that kind of stuff, okay? So that is applying the process to our papers. And so let's actually get started and tackle the types of paper. So to get started with our papers is we first probably need to choose a work area. And what I mean by that is we want to assemble our supplies. We might need a file holder. We might need, we might need hanging folders and manila envelopes. We might need small envelopes or a notebook, a shredder, okay? Everybody needs a shredder. Everybody needs a shredder. I'll say it one more time. Everybody needs a shredder. We need to be careful with our stuff. We actually have 2 shredders. So sometimes we'll put them side by side and we'll just do like, shredding all together and dueling shredders. We need to be safe with our information. And right now, unfortunately, all the shred events that were coming up this spring at local banks and things have been canceled or postponed. So there you go, which is unfortunate. Okay, so I also want to draw your attention to the notebook part, not because it's misspelled apparently, but because, there we go, because when we start to tackle our papers, what tends to happen, and I do this with a lot of my clients, is we start to get ideas. We start to remember things that we needed to take care of. We will pick up a piece of paper and it will remind us that we need to check in with so-and-so. Or, oh, that's right, I just found the receipt for my, getting my ring sized. I need to go in and get it polished or something, whatever that might be. But what happens is it would be very easy to get distracted by that and to not be able to focus on our papers. So what I recommend is always having a notebook nearby to jot down those ideas as they occur to you, okay? I don't want you to get distracted and feel the need to leave the room, go make the phone call, run the errand, etc. We just need to be able to jot down those ideas when they occur to us so we can act on them when the time presents itself. But if you're trying to tackle your papers first, then let's just focus on the papers, okay? So make sure to jot down the ideas, but don't leave just yet. Okay, so getting started also, now might be a great time to get a credit report. We can all, as Illinois residents, I'm assuming everybody either is or was, I know somebody who's not, that's on the call, an Illinois resident, but we as Illinois residents are entitled to a free credit report from each of the 3 credit bureaus, credit reporting agencies. And it's just if we're trying to get our papers together or maybe trying to get our finances in order, it's a great opportunity to go ahead and reach out and get that report, because it'll also, then you might find, there's a doctor's office from 5 years ago that is put a blemish on your credit report because of a paid bill or an unpaid something, and but you've got the lien release for a loan for that car that's been paid off for 10 years, and here's the proof. Okay, so sometimes it's just kind of a nice idea to, if you're going to be tackling this project anyway, that you actually go ahead and grab that electronically also. Okay. The other thing that I want to tell you is to attack the piles that you usually do like in the same way, because it helps us to create that organizing habit. Attack the piles on your desk or the kitchen or whatever, left to right, top to bottom, however that works for you, because again, then we get used to doing it and it becomes a lot easier, right? I also want you to make time for this project. Now, sometimes people like to do it in, big batches. I am not a big batch person. I don't like doing things like that, but I might do it an hour or two. Most of my client sessions are really only 2 or 3 hours when they're in person, because honestly, no one likes to do this for too long. It's tiring, and it's dusty, and it's not always easy. If it was easy, then we'd be doing it all the time. So do make time for this. And if you want to, set a timer on your phone, that's fine. You could set it for, half an hour and see how far you get. I just don't want you to think that, okay, I have 74 years of paper here, I'm going to get it all done today. No, that's a lot to ask, and it's unrealistic, and it's setting you up to fail. Okay, so let's actually tackle those different types of paper. All right. So I want you to start with your most recent papers. If you're wondering where to start, and you have the option of today's mail on the dining room table or the attic with, file cabinets from 20 years ago, do not start in the attic. Start with today's things. Okay, we want to tackle the new stuff first. I'm going to take a breath and take a break. If you guys want to jot any of these things down, I would recommend doing so. Excuse me. Okay. So our active papers. And funny, tell the Sue story. Okay. So I have a client who I worked with in her home, and she invited me in. We were in her dining room, and she had these beautifully stacked piles of paper on her dining room table. She had spent all Saturday morning going through everything that had been in one big heap and divvying it out in categories, right? And that, it was beautiful. It was artfully arrayed, right? And she said that she does that every Saturday morning. Now, the problem is, come lunchtime, when people want to actually sit at the table and eat, she has to grab all those piles up. And then maybe she does one of these things, and she's got like one pile here, and then she does the other direction, but it all ends up back in the same pile again. Okay. And obviously that wasn't working for her, right? So what I suggested for Sue was to go ahead and make those piles and make those categories. But what I wanted her to do was to, was to actually stand those different folders up in a folder on her desk. Now this is just a letter sorter. This is something I had, and I like it because it's pretty, and it sits on my desk. And those are my active folders right there. Like, that's it. That's all we need to do. What might be in my active folders? Okay. So active categories for me are bills to pay, projects that I'm working on, classes that I'm creating, maybe major purchases. We just redid our kitchen, not just, my gosh, it's coming up on 3 years, I suppose, but we had a file folder on the desk, obviously, with those active papers in it. Okay. So active papers, again, were those things that require a next action, right? So I always suggest, and actually I'm going to flip real quick to the end of the handout because there are pictures right here of other desktop filing boxes that you could use. So I like my little letter carrier, a little letter holder, but these are also the same. So this is an actual tote where you can hang file folders. And this is, again, just frames for hanging those file folders, just to give people idea of what that might look like. And what's nice about those is you could also, if people were coming over and you wanted to reclaim your countertop or something like that, you could pick those up and tuck them in the cabinet or under the desk or something like that, okay? So they are active though, and that is important because active papers need to be seen and they need to be acted upon. Now, what's also nice about having an active file holder is new things come in the mail this week, right? So let's say this is my bill folder. As things come this week, I can just, and it's standing here on my desk, I can just drop that in. And then when it comes time to pay the bills every week or every other week, when I open up this folder, all of those things are for me, okay? So it's kind of nice because I don't have to sort again. I've already pre-sorted stuff. And so now I can actually act on those action items, okay? So again, when we're assigning a home and containerizing for those, we want them to be, quick and in our faces, to be honest. Active papers need to be in our faces. Maybe we want to have it by project. Maybe we want to have it by zone or by theme. There's one here that says, thank you notes, stamps, with party planning information, whatever that would look like. Maybe you do meal planning, and so your grocery planning and coupons and recipes are all together. Those are some of the things that might be in your active folders, okay? And then the other part, well, the final part of that is equalizing those papers. And we want to maintain those regularly, maybe not daily. I don't maintain my papers daily. I don't usually have papers on my desk, sitting on my desk at all. But maybe once a week I touch on it and make sure that things are taken care of. If bill paying day is every other Thursday, then I'm certainly going to be going through them at, every other Thursday when it comes time to pay the bills. And I'll be going through and getting rid of stuff that I don't need then, okay? So that's active papers. And again, it's going through that process that we talked about at the very beginning, working on your active papers, right? And again, the most important thing to remember about those active papers is to actually act on them, right? So we want to act on them, we want to pay those bills on time, we want to take care of our business, and then we want to move those papers along. Either now that I'm done, they can go right into the shredder or the recycling bin, or maybe they move on to passive papers. Now, I'm actually going to jump ahead from passive papers. What I want to talk about next are actually our archival papers. And then we'll go back and spend time on our passive papers. So our archival papers are actually pretty easy to maintain, okay? And this is going to be on page 2 of your handout, and it's right here, okay? So what I want you to remember about, again, our archival papers is to protect them. I'm working with a new client. Her name is Diane, and she's kind of catching up from a couple of years of extensive travel, actually. And so she has a lot of catching up to do. But one thing that really resonated with her was to set up a box for long-term safe storage for her archival papers, because they're kind of all over right now in her home, and that is frustrating and a little nerve-wracking for her. So, and I think that's probably the case for many people, and I get that. So as we are going through the piles in different places in our homes, it's very possible that you will start to run across some of those archival papers. So you might be running across, you might be going through your stuff, and then you find the Social Security card, or the most recent mortgage papers on your home because you refinanced a couple of years ago, or maybe tax returns from the last 4 calendar years. Those are all things that could be archival papers. And so, like I said, we want to protect them. We want to take good care of them. And for now, we want to make sure that we just tuck them aside and don't lose them again. if you don't have a safe or you don't have a lockbox or something, don't let that stop you. Okay, go ahead and go, you know, make a temporary folder or temporary box for them so you don't lose them. But like I said, as we go through things, we're going to be finding those archival papers, and it's nice to have some place to put them, even if you don't have that permanent position yet, to collect them and protect them. And then you'll have a better idea of what size box you need to get. So that is our archival papers. Like I said, we don't need to take too long on them because it's a pretty small pile, but they're very, very important. My sons, I have 3. When one gets their driver's license, they find out where the stuff is kept, where the safe is and where the key is, because each of us has a folder in the safe that has birth certificates, in Greg and I's case, marriage certificates, social security cards, and other, baptism or sacramental certificates. So everybody has just one envelope for that information, but it's all in one place, and it's really, really helpful. We have a portable safe. Other people that I know have the same type of setup, and at least one person in the house and one person not in the house needs to know where that information is and where the key is. Okay, so if you're traveling and you need somebody to get it for you or look something up for you, someone else needs to know where that information is, that's not obviously traveling with you. So just think about that. Okay. Now back to our passive papers. Most people, that is the question that I get most often, is how long do I keep things? So we are going to talk about that right now. That's honestly the question that I get at the grocery store or from people after church, or people ask me that all the time. How long do I keep such and such and such and such? And so let's talk about that. So the first thing I want to talk about is the file drawer or box and assigning home containerizing. Okay. So I want us to, when you're starting to tackle your papers, it's very helpful to have maybe folders. Just keep in mind that, a manila folder from Office Max, a box of 100 is like $9. So honestly, it's 9 cents a piece. So if you are trying to get organized, go ahead and label, 12 folders for the months of the year, and maybe have 2 sets of those. So maybe you have a set for 2019, and maybe you have a set for 2020, okay? Because we want it, again, to have a place to start to accumulate those papers as we go, right? And just because you might not be keeping these things permanently, but it's really nice to have a place to tuck those things as you go along, okay? So passive papers, by definition, are done. They are completed papers. No more work needs to be completed upon them, okay? And now we need to wait for a certain amount of time until they're no longer needed for reference. That is a passive paper, okay? So what kind of things are passive papers? Our paid utility bills, our paid, store credit card bills, our paid, receipts from the gas station and the grocery. When we find all of those things, we just look at them and go, now what? What am I supposed to do with this stuff? I don't know. And then it drives us crazy and we want to leave the room. So we need to have a place to put those things, okay? So my suggestion, it's very high tech. Okay, it's not very high tech at all. But what we have here in my house that my husband and I use are, I think the glare is too much. So are just these, like a number 10 envelope. Okay, it's very low tech. I told you, very low tech. But we have number 10 envelopes, and we have them in the cubby above the desk in the kitchen. And this is cleverly named. I went and grabbed it. Can you see? It says April. April. That's it. That's all the complicated it gets. But what is in here? My jewel receipt. Actually not a lot, because, oh yeah, we can't leave the house or go shopping or do anything. So there's not a lot of things in the envelope right now. But that's where that kind of stuff would go. And what's really nice is my husband and I both have the habit of doing that. And so when we find those things at various places in your pocket, in your purse, in your wallet, whatever, all of that kind of the receipts and things go in those envelopes. Now we have a set for 2020 and we have a set for 19. We do not have any of that stuff from before January of 19. None of it. Because honestly, who cares what we bought at the grocery store in 2017? The food is so long gone, we don't need to keep that, right? So we have a way of both containing and also then maintaining those passive papers, okay? So the system that I have here in front of you on the handout, it says 24 hanging folders in an open vertical holder on your desk or in your desk drawer. Sometimes people will have it in a desk drawer. Like I said, our little cubbies are out on the in a cubby above the desk. Greg also has files in his desk drawer for some things, but he's actually kind of transitioned to this more simple system too. But what's nice is we don't have things from 5 years ago. We don't keep receipts that long because we don't need them. Okay, so we have these envelopes and, you know, tax. Okay, so the tax deadline has changed this year. We're now, I think it's July 15th now instead of, don't quote me on that though. But as we do our taxes, we will go through the envelopes from last year and make sure that we've gotten all of the pertinent information that we need to support our taxes as we file them. That's why we keep these folders, these envelopes full of receipts and things like that for that amount of time. And then once we're done with that, I am willing to let go of almost all of it. I'll take April of last year and drop the whole darn thing into the shredder and be done, okay? So it's very nice and it makes it very easy to maintain that system. Okay, so documents and how long to keep them. Honestly, most things do not need to be kept more than a year. Not everybody is comfortable with that. Some people are comfortable with getting rid of things as they're produced. They don't even get receipts. They don't even, you know what I mean? Everything just goes in the shredder or in the garbage can immediately. So I don't necessarily want you to get rid of everything right away because sometimes there are discrepancies on the credit card bill or discrepancies on the bank statement or things like that. But we certainly don't need to keep things for many, many, many years, things that we have, you know, purchased and then have used up and don't need to keep that reference any longer. Okay, so documents and how long to keep them. First of all, advised in that fireproof or safe or paper box, as we talked about, right? If you do want to have a safety deposit box, go ahead, but we do need to have at least a few people listed on that for access. Again, not just the people living in your house. Because sometimes if we're traveling or if something happens to you, other people need to have that access, okay? Next was credit card and ATM receipts. Maybe you want to keep for a month or two for review. Once you see the restaurant bill show up on this month's credit card statement and it's correct, the food is gone. You ate the food. The food is, you know, we don't need to keep that information anymore. If you need to file it with maybe with work for reimbursement or something, then that's one thing. But honestly, a lot of credit card or ATM receipts, once we know that they're clear after we've checked them against the statements, we don't need to keep that information. If you'd like to keep them for a full year like we do, just because it's really easy that way, go for it. That's honestly, this is a lazy man's way of storing it because then after a year, we just know that, okay, April 1st was last week. So we go back and grab 2019's April and we make sure there's nothing in there and then we just shred it. Done. And so we don't have things for more than a year piling up. Clothing receipts, same thing, 3 months or a season. One thing that I like to do is I share gift receipts immediately. So when we are sharing Christmas gifts and things like that, I always just have all the gift receipts in an envelope and hand them over to the parent or somebody in the household, and we don't keep any of that stuff. And again, you don't have to keep it very long. We keep everything a year, but that's just because that's, you know, that's the envelope system. You don't have to keep things probably even that long, but we just do because it's. The next on the list is product manuals. We actually have a drawer. You can have a binder for your product manuals. So I actually use binders a lot. This is my presentation binder, but something like this, if you wanted to have it for your product manuals, you could have a tab, and it could be by maybe by type of item, maybe kitchen item or electronics or room of the house or things like that. What's nice about that is if you do choose to keep them, when you buy a new coffee maker because the old one died, when it's time to put that product manual in the binder, you can pull out the old one, the manual from the old coffee maker, and put in the new one. Now, we were just having a great debate, a lively debate in my house a couple days ago, because who honestly looks at the product manuals anymore? I was reprogramming the language on my Roomba. I have no idea what language he was speaking, but I had to reprogram him. But what did I do? I looked it up on my phone, and I had it there in front of me. You know, I put in the serial number, and so, you know, do we need to keep everything anymore? Maybe not. But if you do choose to keep them, by all means, keep them organized. Okay, so like I said, a binder or a file. My in-laws, when they downsized, they actually created a house binder for their home, and they left the house binder with the home when they moved out. So that had information about all of the appliances for the new owners. It had information on the roof and how long it had been there, the furnace, all that kind of stuff. So having that in that form was really, really helpful when it came time to sell, because all of that information could stay with the home then. And that was a benefit to the homeowners too. Okay, so next is pay stubs and credit card statements. Keep them a year. So most importantly of your pay stubs is the last pay stub of the year, okay? So you probably don't need to keep all of them. But the last pay stub of the year has a really good snapshot of everything that you paid in taxes, any union dues, any kind of things like that. And until you get your W-2 for the year, it's a really good way maybe to just get some ideas about your tax burden for last year before you file your taxes. And again, if you have things on there like union dues and things like that, that's important to have when you file your taxes for last year. Okay, that won't show up on your W-2. So it's good to have that information. So if you're going to keep any of your check stubs, at least keep that last one. If they even come in paper form, they might just come digitally, okay, and be direct deposit. Credit card statements, I say keep for 1 year. Most of my business is actually transacted, most of my business is transacted via my credit card. So I actually keep those for a couple of years because that is a reference guide for me and how I've spent my money and things like that. So I'm not saying you have to do that if you have a million of them or if you don't use them regularly. For me, it's a record. That's my only banking that I do other than, my checking statement for the business. So I do keep that information. But again, I have that in a binder as well, and it doesn't take up a lot of space. Okay. Next are your income taxes. And I lump income taxes and bank statements together because very often our bank statements are the indicators. They're kind of a supporting document for our income taxes. Now, I am a very lucky person because I am married to an accountant. He's very handy. Good guy to have around. And he says, when I started creating all of these, the documents and how long to keep them list, I actually called all of my experts. I called my mortgage broker. I called my attorney. I asked my husband what the IRS says about how long to keep taxes. I called all of my experts. And the caveat to that is, if you don't like my suggestions, by all means, contact your own expert, okay? So if you have someone in the family or if you have someone that you already work with and you trust, by all means, ask them how long to keep these things. This is your document retention policy. That's what we're creating with this list. And so if you have somebody that you trust and you want to get their input, please, that would be great. And then add that to your documents and how long to keep them. Okay, so there's the aside. So back to income taxes and bank statements. As we keep those, we need to keep them for 4 calendar years, okay? Most people have heard 7 years, and some people have even heard 10 years, okay? But the IRS says 4 calendar years. Now, it is, April 7th, but the year got a little crazy on us, so maybe you filed taxes for 19 and maybe you haven't, right? And again, we do have an extension on the deadline, and I think Illinois does, the state of Illinois does too. I don't remember what that one is. Okay. Like I said, 4 years is required. 7 years is has been heard also, and even 10. Any of those is fine, because what I want you to know more about bank statements is not necessarily how many years to keep, but where and how to keep them. Unless you are filing your taxes soon and working on that, you should not be finding your tax documents from 2018 floating around your house, okay? So very often when we are tackling living rooms or bedrooms or linen closets, I kid you not, we have found filed taxes in the linen closet because that was a safe place. I don't know how it happened. But it does happen. And what we want to do is establish a place to hold that information. And it makes it so easy then when you are recreating your what's needed for 2019. Of course, you go back and you start with what you used for 2018, right? That just makes sense. Because what you used, a lot of your accounts will be similar. That information, what you're looking for, that will give you a good list and a good place to start. And then what's nice is when you file your taxes this year for last year, you go in and you put 2019 in the front of the file, and then you purge something from 4 years ago or 7 years ago or 10 years ago. And by purging, of course, I mean shred. So we just need a safe place to keep that stuff, because we shouldn't be finding it floating around our house. And it helps us to then purge things and keep it so you don't find your taxes from 1997 as you're doing your taxes for 2019. It might be fun to look at, but it's not any information that you need to retrieve anytime soon. Okay. Item number H under documents and how long to keep them are investments in stocks and bonds. Honestly, a lot of our brokers keep that information now. I don't even have paper records of such things, but I do have my Hartford guy, Dave, who manages that, and he would be the one to tell me how long to keep the statements and things. Now, those statements tend to support our tax, right, when we file our taxes, so that might be something that we keep along with the taxes and things. Item number I is our insurance. Insurance policies are renewed yearly. So, for example, I have a policy for my business, and I re-up it every September. And as soon as September 1st rolls around and I get my new policy, all the other policies that ever came before now are null and void. They are all completely expired now. And so if I don't have an outstanding claim on one of those, then I do not need to keep any old policy, right? So we really only need to keep the most current policy and the ones, any updates that are less than a year old. And that's on, like I said, homeowners, or in my case, liability, that kind of stuff, right? That stuff, it does not, we do, every time you get a new policy, all the other old policies are now expired, okay? Insurance claims. So if you have an insurance claim and it's completed and you're satisfied, go ahead and purge the papers. Here's actually where I'm going to say again, check with your insurance agent, okay? So if there's anything that comes up, if you've got an active claim, either you're at fault or somebody else is at fault, do check with your agent before you let anything go. I know how much paper is created when we have insurance claims, and it's crazy. But that's one place that we might actually need to keep some of those papers until we're sure that it's completed satisfactorily, if that makes sense. So underneath insurance claims, if there's a lien against another company, again, you want to keep that information until it's all resolved. If you have an accident and it's your fault and your insurance is paying the claim, then it may take a while. And so, yeah, you definitely need to keep all of that. And if you're unsure, contact your agent. Okay. Next are your home and mortgage. I actually called my mortgage guy, Bob, when I was making this list long ago. And his words were, the home is the biggest investment. So it's okay that it generates a lot of paper. However, and again, unless we are actively refinancing, it's not like we should be finding those papers floating around our house, okay? Those should be in a single safe place, and we shouldn't find them tucked in strange places or just on the desktop because we haven't found a home for them, okay? We want to protect those kinds of papers. So we also want to store together the plots, the assessments, the appraisal. If you're a first-time home buyer, you want to keep that information until you move to your next house. You want to keep all your paperwork on second mortgages or any releases to any loans. And it just makes sense to have all that information. We've been in our house for 19 years. So if I found something from my first house, that was a long time ago, and the house is actually, it's been knocked down. So there you go. Something else is there now. So I certainly don't need to keep any information from that house. 19 years. It's older than one of my children, how long we've been here. So, okay. Number L under there is any loan. Keep evidence that the lien has been removed and the note's been paid. So that again, when, if somebody comes back and says your student loan isn't paid or something like that, then yes, absolutely. You can have proof that it is, okay? Item number M was second or third home. You can purge info from the first home. N is legal papers. So with that, it might be bankruptcy papers. I actually called my attorney that I was working with at the time and asked him what his advice was. And if you have filed a bankruptcy, they recommend to keep it for 7 years, but honestly, you probably just need to keep that paperwork forever. And that doesn't generate a lot of paper. It's not a lot. It might be something that, again, should be tucked safely in the bottom drawer of a file cabinet, just to know where it is, but it's probably not something that's going to come out regularly. Okay. Other legal papers, keep them for a bit, but not forever. Number P is your will. By all means, create your will and your durable power of attorney for healthcare and finance and things like that. Every time you create a new will, all other wills that came before need to be destroyed, because we can't have different versions of a will floating around, because it would confuse things terribly, okay? So by all means, create one. You can contact your attorney now, even in this time, because my husband and I redid it a couple of years ago, and it was sitting down and talking about our plans and intentions and our kids and things like that. And you can absolutely do that even in this crazy time over the phone, and have somebody working on that for you. If that would give you peace of mind, that could be really great. Okay. Q under documents is health records and bills. Our medical records are stored by someone else, so we don't necessarily have to keep everything. I think if Blue Cross Blue Shield ever stopped sending out statements of like I just totally lost the word, EOBs, explanations of benefits, I would be out of a job, because I opened so many of those for some of my clients. And honestly, all those are records of communication between your insurance company and your provider. That's all that is. And so you can keep them for a bit, but you certainly, I do not need to find an EOB from 2014 for something that happened long ago, because that information, there's nothing actually personal in those. I still shred them and I recommend to, but there's no medical records. There's no health records or information in those that need to be. Okay. If you do have current and active bills and credit card things to, or excuse me, medical bills to be taken care of, you might want to keep some of those EOBs for a little bit so you can pair things up and match things up. But again, once the active work is done, those should be in a drawer in one of those passive drawers. So you don't have to be looking at it if there's not actually things to be done. Okay. Wow. Okay. So that was documents and how long to keep them. So why did I just spend the last half hour talking about documents and how long to keep them, right? So what we just did is we talked about your residential document retention policy. So very often in industries, they have document retention policies. Schools have them. Doctors' offices have them. My dentist's office, they were going through files one day while I was there, and they were purging people that were, 10 years dormant files or longer. Okay, so that's their document retention policy. Insurance companies have them. Your company at work probably has them, but we don't have them for home. And that's where we get confused. And so what we need to do is we need to create that document retention policy for ourselves and then stick with it. So by all means, like I said, take what I offered tonight. If you want to call your expert, that's great too. Find out what they suggest and add that to your document retention policy. And then it takes that decision making out of the works. And that's really, really helpful. Okay, so the last thing that I want to draw your attention to are all of these resources down here. Okay, so I, of course, put in NAPO, of which I am a member, so the National Association of Productivity and Organizing Professionals. And I'm also a member of NAPO Chicago. I referenced Julie Morgenstern's book, Organizing from the Inside Out, which is where we got that initial SPACE system. Okay. Another book that I sometimes mention but did not tonight is a book called Think Reflections. And then there's some websites here that I want to draw your attention to that will help you to get rid of mail before it actually even comes to your house. And that's a good thing. Okay, so what you can do is you can opt out of credit card offers, and that's the website right there, optoutprescreen.com. There's something called the Direct Mail Association or Direct Marketing Association, and that is where a lot of that unsolicited mail can come from. So what you can do is you can go to the DMA, so Direct Mail Association, dmachoice.org. You can go to the DMA and you can get yourself removed from many of those mailing lists. Not all of them, I wish, but not all of them, but at least some of them, okay? I also recommend, and I do it every January, I go to Catalog Choice, catalogchoice.org, and what you can do is taking the back page of the catalogs that come to you from the holidays or things like that, you can go to catalogchoice.org and you can put in what they want is the mailing address and the key code, like the two different codes that are typically on the back. And what that will do is it will remove you from some of those mailing lists. So it's not instant, but I showed you, this is the extent of my mail today. That's it. 2 things, and I've already torn them into pieces. That's it. So that is because we don't get that many magazines. We don't get, or unsolicited at least, and we certainly don't get a lot of catalogs. And we don't get credit card offers. So we've taken ourselves off of as many lists as we can, and it really has cut down on our paper and the incoming mail that we just didn't want anyway. So credit reports, also so annualcreditreports.com is right there. And the Identity Theft Resource Center is also there. So if you want to, certainly if you feel you've been a victim of one, but wouldn't it be better to not even get to that point, right? So we want to be really careful with our stuff. And so, like I said, there's just some different resources down there to protect you and your identity, and also just get you off of as many unsolicited mailing lists as possible. Okay. 7:31. I brought it in an hour, Stephanie. Okay. I also know that I spoke really quickly, and that I did not give you guys many chances to pause or ask questions. And I don't know if we have an option to do that now, but I do want to say, I know I've gotten a couple emails from folks as we've gone along, and I am happy to answer any kind of questions that you have, either now if we can or not, or via email or text, or via my website. I will tell you now, I'm terrible about answering my phone, and it turns out I don't do it even when there's a pandemic. If I don't know your number, I will not answer. Sorry. But I will answer questions and things like that. Like I said, via email or via text. I'm always open to answering questions and things like